Everyone, hello there. I'm Nina Waxman, and I'm the founder of No Rare, but also in my spare time, I'm also an author. I write books about mystery books about Venice in the 17th century. So that's given me some experience in the author world and being a moderator of panels like this, where we have some contributors and authors of this. And today we're very lucky to have Erin Paterson, who's the editor and author of the new book, Positively Rare, which is, a collection of essays of different people with rare diseases and their experiences of coming to terms with it. And one of those people is Laura Well, who's up above. And both Erin and Laura are in the rare disease world as caregivers. Laura has a child with an ultra rare disease. Erin has a father with a rare disease, and Erin also has a rare disease herself. So she also has the understanding of what it's like to care for somebody with a rare disease. And then the interesting thing that we have here is Laura is a contributor in the essays to Positively Rare, but she also on her own has done art, has done poetry, has written a blog. She does little videos. So she's, multifunctional in terms of expressing her creativity through the written and verbal word. And Erin started out as an author, but she also became an editor and a publisher. So each of them have transitioned to roles that I'm sure they never thought they'd be in before. And they found ways of expressing living with a rare disease in this very positive way that they believe has helped them and also can help others. So that's why we're here talking to them. So I'm going to start by we're going to have more of an open discussion right now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a discussion point. Now, from my experience, my grandson was born with an ultra rare disease. And originally I put his story on our website with a picture of him. And my daughter made me take it down. And she said she does not want it to be public that she has a child with a rare disease because he doesn't know he has a rare disease and she doesn't want him to be exempted from having a rare disease. So my daughter is one of those people, and we have two other people like that are part of my network and our network, and they also said the same thing. One of them is afraid of being discriminated from jobs that she's applying for them, and the other one is just a very private person. So I just wanted to understand from both of you, it's not so easy to be public about living with a rare disease. And how did you come to be so open about your diagnosis and its effect on your lives?
Well, I kept my diagnosis a secret for a very long time as well. I would say it was a good 10 years that I lived in secrecy and fear. And I worried about all of those same things as well. I worried that if friends found out that I had this gene positive diagnosis, that they wouldn't want to invest or maintain the relationship with me. I was convinced my husband knew about my diagnosis, but I was convinced he was going to ask for a divorce any day. And for sure, I thought that I owned a business at the time, and I thought if customers found out that they wouldn't want to shop at my store. I really felt that if people knew my genetic status, that I'd end up alone and unloved for the rest of my life. And then after about 10 years, I started getting sick of hiding and I started to feel shameful. And I just thought, like, why am I ashamed of this? I didn't do anything to deserve this. It's just something in my genetics. And I started taking small steps to come out from that secrecy and fear. And it was terrifying. And I'd have panic attacks after doing it. And I would think, like, why did I just do that? Am I trying to get attention? Why do I have to be public about this? And I just took little tiny steps because I felt there has to be a better way of living. I don't want to live the rest of my life this way.
So that's really important what you said about taking small steps, because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people feel it has to be all or nothing. And the way that you can take little baby steps at a time to be a little more open about it is something that's
Mhm.
very interesting. Now, some of you, Laura, what about you? Did you take baby steps also, or did you go all out right from the beginning?
I went all out probably, but in a bit of a different way. It was really this like cathartic emotional release that I needed. When my son was diagnosed with a rare condition, I just really felt like I fell off a cliff emotionally. And one of my kind of self-care aspects of my life has always been running. And I started running a little bit longer than I used to, and it would help me sleep at night. And I found myself mid-run stopping and having words just kind of spill out of me. And I'd be writing them in my little notes app on my phone. And I was in such an emotional place at the time that full sentences couldn't even capture it. And so it was like these little phrases that would just kind of fall out and start to piece together. And it ended up creating poetry, my version of poetry. And I've always been a fairly open book. I think that we all are on this spectrum, and it's a very vulnerable thing to share, but I think I'm just more willing, for whatever reason, to put myself out there. And I think one of those, it was certainly an act of catharsis to write it, but there was an added act of catharsis to put it out and share in the world. So I just created my own little website and started sending my poetry out there and sharing it on Facebook. And I felt like the rare diagnosis in our family changed me, kind of just shattered our world. And I wanted people to see that. So, because when I ran into somebody on the street, I was like, I'm so changed. I want them to know how much it's changed. But that being said, I think I've learned so much through this journey that there are times of active sharing and where that's really beneficial. And there are times where I can just feel, this isn't the right time for me to share this information. And then I kind of pull back in and just share with people who have really earned my trust, close friends, family. And there's this ebb and flow. It's not, lateral movement.
So you kind of became an author almost as a way of expressing your inner, like you said, it was very helpful to express your inner emotions. And even though I don't write about living with a rare disease, I write about Venice because that's cathartic for me too. And that's a way of me letting off my inner stress as well, even though it's not on the topic. So, Erin, did you find a difference when you were, because you originally were caregiving for your father before the diagnosis, weren't you?
Caregiving came after. Really, my dad
Okay.
has had symptoms for about 25 years, and it's only in the last
Wow.
5 years that I've transitioned to being his caregiver. I started writing when we were both diagnosed as gene positive for Huntington's disease,
Uh,
and we weren't symptomatic yet.
and then what made you to start writing? Where was that on your small steps? Was that baby step 4, 5, 6, or where did that come in?
I would say that was a baby step because I didn't really tell anybody that I was doing it. I just had one writing coach, and just being able to share with that writing coach what I was feeling and thinking was a huge big deal. And it would I just, after talking to her, just like have to have a nap because it was so stressful, just even expressing it to that one
Wow.
person. And it took me 4.5 years to write my first book. And that 4.5 years of being in my office, closing the door, shuttering myself in the privacy of my office, really processing everything that I'd gone through with genetic testing. Every night, that was a little bit of a step towards me coming out and saying, I have this rare disease diagnosis. But even just saying the words Huntington's disease in public were a big deal to me.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, you don't want to be marked. I have a friend
Mhm.
who also had a diagnosis of very refractory MS. So she had really bad MS. And she would never, even though we all knew she got a diagnosis, we were not allowed to discuss it at all with her. I know, Lori, you did a piece about what friends should not say to a person with a rare disease. But one of the reasons she wanted to do that is because she said otherwise every single encounter it would be, how do you feel? How are you feeling? And she didn't want to feel like she was sick every single moment of the day, and that every encounter was somebody giving her this piteous glance about how you feel. And even when her disease became so noticeable, we took a silent oath, all of us, to just ignore it and talk to her without describing it as well. So I think in a way, when you write also, you can let out those things, even if you don't show them. If you don't want to show it or you don't want to discuss it personally, when you write, you can let that stuff out. And it sounds like, Erin, you were journaling, more like journaling initially, and then journaling with the writer's coach, with a coach, helped you turn journaling into authorship, right?
I always knew that I wanted, as soon as I got diagnosed, I thought I need to write a book because, like Laura, it had changed my life in an instant and I became a different person. And I would go to people and say, I'm different now. And they'd say, but you're just the same old Erin to us. And I'm like, but I'm not the same old Erin. And nobody could see this inner journey that I went through. So I really wanted to capture that because the changes were a good thing, even though it came about from a bad thing. And I would say that books are what saved me through my depression, reading about other people's journey. Sometimes I would just read a book about somebody who had a stroke. And because it was about the brain, that was like a hugely brave thing for me to read at the time. Or another time when I was going through infertility, I'd read a book about somebody who is living child free because I thought that might be my future and I was trying to come to terms with it ahead of time. So I knew that books had this power to help other people. Even if it was just like one sentence in a book that helps a person get through the next day, I wanted to be able to do that for other people.
Laura, you too?
So struck by the concept of reading a book as an act of bravery. I've never thought about it like that before. But that rings true for me as well, that there are some books where you pick up and you kind of have to take a deep breath before or a nap afterwards because it's such a journey. And I have an annual girls' weekend with some good friends. And after Alden's diagnosis, my son's diagnosis, I went to that girls' weekend and introduced myself as Laura 2.0 because I was
Ah,
just like, I'm changed, but and I had shared enough that people had some intel on why that might be. I guess I
yeah.
also was curious to reflect, Erin, like the process of writing about something that happened 10 years ago and the power in that, where you get to kind of, they always say like, oh, you got to show yourself self-compassion. You speak to yourself like you're your own best friend. And the act of kind of writing about yourself in the past separates yourself from yourself in that moment. And I don't know, you get to kind of reflect and be that friend to yourself through writing. I don't know if that makes sense or was it something you've experienced, but I guess as I look back on my journey and the experience of writing my story in Positively Rare, I almost felt like I was reconnecting with and healing the person I was in
100%.
those moments.
100%. That's the power of writing, reconnecting and healing. And when I wrote my first book, I actually put myself back in that moment as if I was experiencing it and it was happening right on that day. I really wanted to be able to express the pain of going through those things. I didn't want to write it from a position where I thought, oh, I have all the answers now. I wanted it to be as real to the experience of going through it as possible.
What's interesting is Laura wrote a piece for us on No Rare where you actually went back. Like it was like she became a ghost of Christmas past to herself,
Mm.
observing herself when she went for that first time diagnosis, which I thought
Mhm.
was really, really, it resonated with me because a lot of times, no matter what it is you went through, there's always like, think about it, what it was before you knew. And you were sitting there and you were so naive and what you wish when the article talks about what she wished she could have told herself at that time to
Mm.
reassure
Mhm.
herself, which was good because in a way it was a different technique to do what you're doing, Erin, because you're writing in the moment so other people can view what it's like going through the moment. With
Mhm.
Laura, she took a different writer's technique, which was looking back at herself and telling herself what she didn't know. So that's very interesting that I think both of you explored different techniques as you've been writing and
Mhm.
transitioning from one medium. Like Laura, you went from poetry, then you started writing prose, you did some photography, also different means of expression to get that emotional part of you out there. And Erin, I'm wondering when you transitioned, first you started writing a book, how did you start to get others to contribute to get to, because Positively Rare, this is not your first version of Positively Rare, your first edition, right? It's
Yep.
like the third.
So I have a book called Huntington's Disease Heroes, which is 25 stories from 9 different countries, from people who are from Huntington's disease families. And it's all different perspectives of the disease because, as you know, one person's story is just one person's story. And there's so many thoughts and feelings and opinions surrounding things. So after my book was released, I just really felt this relief that I wasn't expecting. And it took me a number of months to really understand what was going on. It's just like all of the stories could live inside of the book now and I didn't have to carry them anymore. And after experiencing that, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to help other people feel that way? So then that's why I started reaching out to people. And I thought they would be as fearful as I would. I thought, there's no way I'm going to find anybody who wants to be public with their story. And I had over 100 people reach out to me for my first book and we ended up with
Wow.
those 25 stories. And then I decided, well, HD is a rare disease, and we actually have quite a big community, but there's so many people within the rare disease community who've never met another person with the same rare disease as them, or even spoken to another person with the rare disease. So I started reaching out to people I knew within the rare disease community to put this book together, Positively Rare. So there's more than 25 different rare diseases represented because a lot of people are living with multiple rare diseases.
Yeah, that's another great point. But I'm wondering, was it difficult because you became an author? How did you learn how to become an editor? You know, it's like, and a publisher. So
I
you
just,
accomplished three different steps there, right?
yeah, I'm very determined.
Uh,
I'm good at researching and teaching myself things, and I took all of the lessons that I learned from having a writing coach when I was writing my first book. And all of those lessons I took and taught everybody else.
But in terms of the editing prices, how did you find out about publishing it? Because we had talked and you said that you looked at traditional publishers, but
Yep.
then decided to publish it on your own. So can you talk about that? Because I don't think a lot of people realize that you can publish things on your own and it's
Yep.
not that difficult if you want to. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough to get laid off during COVID, and I thought, well, now is the perfect time to figure out how to publish my book. So it did take me a year to figure it out because there were a lot of steps. You know, there's 10 to
Mhm.
12 steps. And when you say I need to get my book edited, what does that even mean if you've never done editing before? So then you have to research all the different types of editing and figure out what kind of editing you need. But then once you hire an editor and get that part done, then you're on to the next step. It was just a matter of researching what all the steps were and what the requirements were in order to get the book. It is possible to do it on your own. Amazon makes it easy once you have the story
Yeah,
written. I would say writing the story is the harder part than figuring out how to
I
get it
agree.
published.
I agree. Amazon has a program and there's also Readsy, which allows you to upload and format your books fairly easily and publish
Mhm.
them as well fairly
Yeah.
easily. Yeah. Laura, what about you transitioning from one medium to the other? And also you talked about going quiet, also not being
Mm.
so public. So when you go
Well,
quiet, do you journal instead? Like, do you keep writing or do you stop? Or what medium do you go back and forth from when you're going overt to quiet or whatever?
absolutely. And I think it's really correlated with kind of my time capacity in terms of what caregiving is demanding of me, and kind of my mental health, right? And I think there's some mediums that I can access more when I'm feeling really emotional, and some when I'm, want to go internal is more towards the like painting and poetry. And when I want to really provide something that's going to be perhaps of more like obvious use to others, it's like a research driven blog. Recently, I'm in awe of you, Erin, and you're describing bite-sized steps towards publishing because I've been doing bite-sized steps towards trying to just journal again. I have been in a period of like just trying to heal and process a new diagnosis in our family. So, my bite sized steps last week was to open a Google Doc and title it Journal. Because I recognize that as much as I love like a pen and paper and this like old school version of journaling, I just don't do it. So I'm like, I gotta find something I can just do. And so right now, I'm in kind of this phase of just writing unfinished work. I'm writing for nobody but myself. For the first time in a while, it's really been nice. I'm trying to get in the habit of just writing for as little as 2 minutes, which
Mhm.
is like just setting a timer and just 2 minutes. Like, because it
Wow.
has been a time where I think I've been kind of avoiding getting quiet, and but 2 minutes is okay.
I think
We
that's a
could
good
start
point because
there.
when you do write, when you do really writing, you have to be, Erin, you said, like you have to get into the zone. And you
Sure.
really need time to yourself to do that. And if you're caregiving or you're actively in your household, it's very hard to get into the zone. You know, it's funny. I read there's a famous poetess from the 17th century, a woman, I think her name was Anne Richardson. And she had to do all the household chores. And then she would write after all the kids went to sleep, after all her chores went to sleep and were done. And she would start writing her poetry. And she died young, and her husband was the one who brought her poetry and published it. So I'm
Mm.
just wondering, as far as your spouses or your family, have they been supportive when you're trying to write, or are they don't want to talk to it? Talk a little bit about your spousal support.
Well, I would have I'm just doing my 20 minutes for the day. That was what I was trying to get in. And I would say, okay, I'm going to do my 20 minutes now. And my husband would go, see you in 3 hours. Because he knew once I got into it, then I wouldn't come out of the room. So, but there was a time where I was very busy in my life when my daughter was a lot younger as well. And I also used the Notes app. And sometimes I'd have 5 minutes while I was waiting for the bell to ring, and I would sit in my car and write for 5 minutes. And the great thing about, not making it this big thing where you have to sit down and write for hours is I'd be like, oh, what am I going to write about next? And I'd be thinking about it on the drive. And then I'd be really productive in that 5 minutes because I would have been thinking about it all day already. And thinking about it gave me joy as well, even though
Yeah.
I was writing about a hard thing. And then all of a sudden it just flows out of you onto the page and it feels so good when that happens. So I think it's a really great, Laura, that you've decided to do your 2 minutes a day. You're saying, okay, this is the time for me. So that's wonderful.
And I find we have this health story app that Laura helped design with us. But one of the good things about it is we heard from Laura and other moms who are too busy to write, like we're talking about being in your car. We made
Mhm.
it voice journaling. So you
Yeah.
can actually talk into it and then capture your emotions with an emoji. And the other thing is if you just feel really good because the sunset looks gorgeous, you can take a picture and add it to your journal. So that allows you to come back to it and remember a moment in time and a moment.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't really journal a whole, treatise on, but if you want to just capture a thought, it's a good way to just capture a thought or a moment to note for later when you want to get in the zone, because I don't know about you, but those random thoughts hit me sometimes with me because I write murder mysteries. It was a great place for a murder. So sometimes I'll take a picture of it and write a little note about it. But that's what happens when you're a writer. So that's another little small step that you can take is just make a note to yourself, even if emotionally you're too wrought up to write it now, just make a note and capture it so that you can come back to it later. So I was going to
Can
ask
I
Laura also. Yeah, go ahead.
just the data, like that one moment snapshot into your world,
Mhm.
it's been wild to when I opened the Google Doc to journal, I found like an old one and it was like, oh my gosh, like, it's been 5 years. And just to have that data point of where my head was at, how I was thinking about it, it was this awesome realization of how far Alden has come and how far I've come as his caregiver and advocate. And that's the power of this Health Stories app, which I have used kind of within like as a caregiver mind, not just like who I am, but as a caregiver mind. I've been logging in and doing this, audio recording what happened today with Alden. Often it's like moments where there's big doctor's appointments or he's more or less symptomatic, and I'm really seeing it. And the wild thing is the AI like spitting out a synopsis of the last like 3 months or 6 months, because it will tell you like how your journey has been or how Alden's journey has been in this, like you don't need to flip back through your journal and review it yourself. It
Yeah.
gives you that in a really thoughtful way. I mean, it is
Mhm.
totally extraordinary. And then to circle back with the spouse question, we're busy family trying to raise 3 kids with a medically complex kid. I think often we are just like in business mode, getting the household tasks done and ignoring the journey that is happening and the beauty and challenge and sorrow and joy and like the meat of it is just we don't have the time for it. And so one of the powers of writing is I'll read him something I've written, on a Saturday night. I'm like, hey, do you have the capacity to listen to something I wrote this week? Which, because it's heavy often. And we'll sit and it's this awesome connection point where otherwise I might not be able to express that. But I just read my writing to him and he's like, thank you. Often it's not the verbose reflection I'm looking for, but he's heard me. and he's
At
earned the
least you
right to do
shared
it.
it. So I think that's a good thing also. That's another how to get started. And the other thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is how did you find your voice? You know, when you write, you try to write from a unique perspective that's you, right? So you both have very different voices when you write. So how did you come to finding your voice? Because I think that's people have to understand that when you write, you're writing in a point of view. You have to write who you are and what your perspective is and stick to that. And if you're going to try to pull back and give like an overview of things, you have to understand where the time and place is for that. So how did you find your voice?
I would say for me, finding my voice was just about figuring out who I was as a person authentically and just being very genuine with what I was sharing and just being very raw and real. And after my first draft was complete, after a long, long time, I did have some beta readers read over it, and the main feedback I got was that it was too heavy. So then I had to go in after the fact and find places to lighten it up where I did
Mm.
reflect in the past, where I would say, hey, I had this really great party and all those people were there to support me. I just didn't realize it at the time. And then I reflected on how those people supported me in that journey in order to make it lighter for the reader. But really, it was just all about being authentically me and sharing what that experience was like.
That's really good because the first time I wrote my first book, I didn't know you don't send out your first draft. So I
Oh,
just finished the draft and sent it to agents. And one of the agents wrote back and said, you need a lot of work on this. And then I learned that it's just like when people do a movie, they don't shoot the whole movie. The movie comes together in the edit. And it's the same thing. You have to read it or have somebody else read it and then give you the things that aren't making sense or
mhm,
that you need said, make it more positive. And then it's when you go back and edit it that it finds its final shape. So the
mhm,
first thing, like you said, from a how-to standpoint, the way I was taught was write it all out. Just get it all in your head, get it onto the paper, and then realize that you'll come back afterwards and then you'll reread it, or you'll have some help with rereading it, and then you could edit it. But don't edit yourself as you go along, or you won't be able to get the words out. Laura, did you have any experience about that?
I Absolutely. Especially, I found such power in really leaving something for a month, getting it all out and then closing the draft and not looking at it for a little while. I had the advantage, I wrote in Erin's book, Positively Rare. I had the advantage of writing my first draft and then I went and had a baby. Uh, and so I came back to it with a whole different brain with a bunch of new hormones and was like, oh, okay. But that's not an easy how to. But you can certainly walk away from it for a little while. And I agree that getting really authentic and like really honest with what was going on in your head at the time. And that's what I like about the first draft, where maybe you don't need to share it or you're right. You're writing it for yourself. I would not worry about who you're writing it for, right?
mhm,
Right.
I think then you over edit and over concern yourself with that. That being said, I also have really enjoyed doing some writing where I think about the audience. For instance, like the blog that I've written for No Rare is called Rare Resiliency. And I come from a scientific background. So I have a master's in nursing and I've through college and grad school, really enjoyed like digging into the data. And so when I was really looking for how do I survive this journey as a caregiver, what are the skills that I need to cultivate? What are the habits that are going to help me survive this and thrive? I went to the data. Like I grew from a lived experience. Like, oh, I've really transitioned from feeling like I'm in flight or fight mode to like I've kind of got a bit of stability here. Is that a shared experience among caregivers? And then I would go and read about the data out there and then put together a blog article where it was the science and my lived experience. And that was a really cool way of like binding the person I was as a nurse practitioner and this new role as a caregiver.
That's a good thing. I'll just say one thing that I've done is that I have a brother who died of cancer, and my two brothers died of cancer. My cousin died of cancer all around the same time period. So I was really hurting, and I was really upset. Obviously my risk factors for cancer are very high also, and I was really upset about it. But my way of channeling that upset is I go to the fantasy and speculative world. So instead of writing reality, what I did is I wrote a short story called Horror Therapy about a new cancer therapy where they actually take people to a haunted house and scare their immune system up so it fights the cancer. So you can go in any kind of direction that you want with an idea, but if it makes you feel better afterwards, it's done its job, no matter how it does. And one of the things also I learned with the Health Story app is that I got some prompts from it, like that said, because what happens is even if you're not on it for a while, you'll get a prompt, and the prompt notification said, "What have you done for your health today?" And all of a sudden I realized, because I have a condition also, and I keep it on my app, and I realized, all I've been using this app is to note my bad days. And why don't I note the app to reward myself about my good days? Like I went running. I got the key to the gym. I didn't go in the gym, but I got the key to the gym. So any little thing I can do to reward myself, I want to capture that, because like Laura said, then in my summary, it'll give me a summary paragraph that says, you did all these things for yourself today. Even if it's like, I had a cup of coffee at a coffee shop with my friends and it made me take the stress off. We need that positive reinforcement as well. It gives you a lot of hope and positivity. And I think that's what Positively Rare does as well, about positive step forward. Thank you both for your time, and you can download the Health Story app yourself and try it on your own as well. We're also planning a how-to workshop, an actual workshop of how to write your own memoir, or how to write in general, whatever you want to know, which will happen in the fall. And we're also going to be doing a number of other book talks across the board from different people. Sometimes they're how-tos. We have somebody who wrote a children's book for rare children and how to be different, which is very hard for kids. And
One
we have
coming up on the sibling experience.
yes,
I know
another
what
one
about.
coming, a woman who's written a book about what it's like, not just, she doesn't have a rare disease. She didn't care for somebody with a rare disease, but the impact of having a brother with Prader-Willi in the family, and how it changed, like you said, 2.0, and made her family completely change from what it was before. And I think all of us recognize that helps too. Now, aside from capturing the pain, I think we want to leave everybody with is that you can capture the joys and the good things that have happened along the way. And 2.0, becoming a 2.0 of yourself is not always a bad thing. It's sometimes a good thing. And you find real purpose in your life, as well as real joy in the new experiences that you have and being able to help others as well.
And download the Health Stories app if that sort of integration is great for you. It really has been an awesome thing for myself and some other people living with rare to kind of to track the journey. And thank you, Erin, for being here.
Thank you for having me.